What's up guys, Eric here, welcome back to the channel. Today's video I'm talking about having the Sigma 85mm 1.4 art for 4 years and if I think it's still worth getting in 2024. I've had this lens for 4 years and in those 4 years I have used it to its max potential. I've started taking photos of people, cars, basketball, soccer, product photography, you name it, I've done it. And even video scenarios, I filmed it with basketball and soccer and all these different scenarios I've used this lens for. And let me tell you, this lens is great. Now, since having this lens, I literally just watched my work elevate. So, a little background about me if you guys are new and you're a new viewer here. When I started my photography, very beginning of 2020, I started with an old Nikon camera. A few months later down the road, I upgraded to a Sony a7 II, and that came with the kit lens. I believe it's a 28-70 f3.5 to 5.6. It's not the greatest, but I was using that for a little while, and I realized in a lot of scenarios that it was not the greatest in low light, and it wasn't the greatest for portraits, but you know, it was versatile, and in my beginning stages, it was definitely what I needed. But my goal from the beginning of starting my photography career has always been to make this my job. Fortunately, I'm in a position where I'm making it my job, and I'm well on my way to becoming full-time very soon. But in the later half of 2020, after about 5 months of consistently using that kit lens, I knew it was time for an upgrade. At the time, I was watching all types of different photography YouTubers and content online reviewing different lenses, and you know, purchasing your first major lens, it's a big decision. So in this video, I'm trying to give you guys my honest feedback to hopefully give you guys some reassurance if you want to buy this lens or you're looking at other options. Now, this lens right here is not cheap. I believe I paid like $1,200 or $1,400 for this lens. It was a big investment at the time. My first big investment was the Sony a7 II. That was not the cheapest, but again, as you progress as well in your career and as you're just figuring out what you want to do, it comes a point in time where you gotta upgrade your gear. People always love to talk about gear doesn't matter, gear doesn't matter. In the beginning, it doesn't matter. As you're progressing, you're getting clientele and you're trying to get paid, and you know, you're getting all these different opportunities and growing your clientele, and you're consistently making a good monthly income, yearly income, you need to buy the expensive gear. Now, I knew that, so therefore I bought the 85. And with this 85 lens, I'll throw some work on the screen. I've used it so much. I've taken thousands, probably if I were to guess, probably close to 100,000 photos with this lens. Just the variety in which this lens is capable of is amazing. I think the #1 use for this lens is portraits. So if you are very much just fixed on, I want to do just portrait photography, this lens is great. Now, when I got this lens, my clientele was pretty small for portraits because at the time, again, I was still learning, I was still improving, but once I bought this lens and I went and got with some friends and siblings, I was taking their photos, I was making use of being able to go all the way down to 1.4 aperture, keep it around 2.8. I was learning around the time, trying to figure out, you know, what is the best, what's the sweet spot for that. And honestly, in my opinion, today, I'd say anywhere between 2.5 to 2.8 is a really good aperture for your portraits, because some people, you know, they get a lens, oh, I can go all the way down to 1.4. And, you know, sure, it gets you the nice blurry background, but a lot of times you're not getting the full details. If you use it, you might get, for me, for example, if this lens right here was on 1.4, you'd probably get maybe my nose in focus, the hat right here, maybe just the eyes. But when you have like a 2.5 to 2.8, you're gonna get the whole person in focus. Now, that is another thing though that people really love about these lenses, is having that bokeh, being able to get that nice blurry background, that professional scale look, if you will. And yes, that's great, but you really have to be smart about it, and you don't want to just be, oh, I'm gonna go spend $2,000-3,000 on a lens because it goes down to 1.4 aperture, 1.2. But you know, a lot of times I'm never shooting in that scenario. As I mentioned, I'm usually 2.5, 2.8, 3.2. It all varies on the situation, and that's another thing you got to learn too with these lenses. It's a lot different than your kit lens, and that's kind of the next point I was going to dive into, is that going from my scenario of a zoom lens to a fixed 85mm lens, it's different. You only have one focal length, so there is no easy zooming in or out. You kind of have to really compose your shots, and you got to move with it as well, because you know, you're not zooming in and out. You gotta either step closer or step further away. And a lot of times with this lens, yes, I think it was great for the most part. However, I feel like at times 85 was a little too much, because at the time I only had this and my zoom lens. So there were scenarios where I felt like it was too zoomed in, and I'm taking, you know, a couple photos, start taking some family photos, and it's like, okay, more than 2 people, this lens is, you gotta stand really far away from them if you want to get everyone in frame. And I just felt like that became a little bit of a hassle. So that was a reason why I upgraded. Well, not upgraded, I got another lens, which was a Sigma 35mm. I'm gonna make another video about that lens soon, my thoughts on that. But for a while, yeah, I was rocking the 35 and the 85, and those were like, I felt like I was set. Now, the reason I don't really use this lens as much today, because I upgraded to a Sony 70-200 about a year ago. And the reason for that is because as I was growing my photography, I picked up a part-time job photographing a men's league for basketball, and I was using the 85. Now, it was good depending on where I was standing, if that makes sense. So if I was standing pretty much directly under the hoop, sure, I can get some good close-up shots. However, if a guy's at the top of the key or at half court, or obviously on the other side of the court, they're very small, and it wasn't meeting my standards in terms of what I know looks good for basketball photography. So that was kind of a reason why after a while I was like, yes, this lens is good, but I feel like it's better for portraits, for cars, and different avenues. So if you are interested in anything within sports, I think this lens, it'll get you some good stuff depending on where you're standing, depending on what the sport is, but you're not gonna get the max potential that you can with the 70-200. So that's a downside, I would say. So some of the positives of this lens is that 1.4 aperture, it's great. Again, as I mentioned, you don't want to go too crazy and go all the way down to 1.4 unless you really need to. I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's cheaper than a lot of lenses. I feel like the average lens is, I feel like, anywhere between 1,800 to 3 grand. So it's kind of on the cheaper end, but has positives and negatives to the price. Like, you're not completely breaking the bank, it's also not cheap. So it's something to definitely factor in. That's another thing. Before you guys buy any type of equipment, do your research. That's why I'm making videos like here, hopefully to help you guys explain the purpose of these lenses, to maybe persuade you to get into lenses or into something else. Because my fear is always buying something and not using it. Luckily, everything I've purchased, lenses, camera bodies, I use a lot to the max. So for me, it's like I always, when I'm looking at getting new stuff and I have a new lens coming on the way, which you'll see content on that soon, I love doing my research. I love talking to other creators about the lenses and things of that nature, because you really want to get your money's worth. You don't want to be regretting your purchase and having to sell it because you wanted something else. So just to give you guys another brief rundown, portraits, great. Sports, decent. Cars, great. But you're really trying to get into sports and stuff, you might as well make the upgrade to the 70-200. This is a lot more expensive. This was about 3 grand, I think, after taxes and shipping. It's a hefty price, but it's very versatile. That's the thing I'm really learning to enjoy more about zoom lenses, is that they're versatile. I can go from 70 to 200. So fairly wide to very much punched into 200. So I use this lens for literally just about everything. The only time I don't use this lens is if I'm filming these YouTube videos, or I'm filming some freelance stuff with sports and I need to be more closer to the clients, and I want wider angles of the scenarios I'm shooting in. This lens right here, I use it for portraits, car photography, engagements, weddings, sports, all the sports I shoot for my college, basketball, football, soccer, volleyball, baseball, you name it. For both photo and video, because I do both photo and video. That's something to also consider, is do you want to, buy this lens, stick with it, or do you want to save a few months of money and go all out on this lens? So there's definitely a lot of things to consider when making these purchases, and hopefully take the time. This is the biggest thing too, which I'm really learning over time, is really sit down and take the time before you make these purchases, because I'm not gonna lie, when I got this lens 4 years ago, I was 18 at the time, and I was really just like, I need to get something better, and I'm glad I did get this lens. However, if I had waited maybe 2 months, a month and a half, I could have just bought this lens. So those little things to consider, is that you really get what you pay for. Some other great things about this Sigma 85 is that I think it's fairly lightweight lens. It's a lot lighter than the 35mm that I have. Also, it's not too big, so when it goes in your backpack and your camera bag, it's not too big. The other thing to note about this, it's 77 millimeters for your filters. So what was great for me is I kind of lucked out, is that this is 77 millimeters and this is as well. So I could just easily use them on either or. So that was a really big plus for me. Besides all of that, I think that kind of wraps up this video. It might have been kind of brief, but throughout the video, I showed a lot of photos on the screen throughout the years of using this lens. Hopefully that gives you guys a general idea of what to expect if you purchase this lens or if you're considering something else. With that being said, I hope you guys did all enjoy this video. If you guys have any other videos you'd like me to see or equipment to review, let me know in the comments down below. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a good one.